In our first reading, we meet this person called Qoheleth. And he's probably a teacher or a professor, but he's certainly an elder. Like Deacon Larry, he's seen it all, he did it all, and he had it all. And now he tells us, all is vanity. This is not a homily for people under 30 years old would appreciate. Because young people, you're convinced that you're going to use all things, wisdom, intellect, power, passion, to be successful, to get on top. When you get older, well, you get a bit more realistic. We might ask ourselves, why is this even in the Bible? Because it's rather depressive. The reading is certainly sardonic. It's there because it conveys spiritual truths of immense significance. In short, it reminds us that none of the things of this world have final significance, that our ultimate joy and well-being is found in none of the things of this world. So today we're treated to the reflections of this really old curmudgeon named Qoheleth, the teacher, the elder. And we're told he's a king of Israel, son of David, who would be Solomon. But it's probably not Solomon, but it was attributed to him. Solomon, as you remember, had it all. He had power, he had riches, he had pleasure, he had great honor. Now, think of someone you know like Qoheleth, an old uncle or maybe a grandfather, someone who has been around a long time, has seen it all, and with Qoheleth can say, there's nothing new under the sun. Someone who has a bit of a jauntish view of the world, almost cynical, yet still has a lot of wisdom to offer from that experience. Think of the older version of Richard Nixon. He was very hard to impress. He was hard to throw him a curveball. He had seen it all. He had heard it all. He had heard every political speech there ever was, and he was rather cynical at the end of his life about it all. And so Qoheleth tells us, vanity of vanity, all things are vanity. It's cynical, it's sardonic, it's almost desperate. All speech is labored. There is nothing man can say. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear with hearing. Even when we say, see, this is new, it has already existed in the ages that preceded us. In other words, after a time, you've heard it all, you've seen it all. Almost like a political election. After you've been through a few of them, you realize the candidates all sound the same, aren't about anything new. They're just trying to impress you. So you could say, been there, done that, not so impressed. And then Qoheleth says, I have stored up wisdom, surpassing all who were before me, and my mind has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this is also but a chasing after the wind. Remember, Qoheleth is considered Solomon, and Solomon sought wisdom, and he attained wisdom. Now he looks back and he sees how much vanity it all really was. Because the more you know what you don't know. The more you learn, the more questions you have. Even wisdom seems like a chase after the wind. And then how about the pleasures of this world? He says, come now, I will make a test of pleasure. Enjoy yourself. I said of laughter, is it mad? And of pleasure, what use is it? But this too is vanity. Think that someone like Solomon would have had all the sensual pleasures he wanted. But now he sees that it's all passing, it's all ephemeral, it's all superficial. Think of some of the great Hollywood celebrities who die prematurely. They seem to be at the top of the world, a huge success, lots of fine things, lots of power and popularity. And then it's suddenly gone, turned to dust. Someone else gets their fortune. Someone else lives off their success. Vanity of vanity, all things is vanity. And then he says, I undertook great works. I built houses, planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. Remember, he's the king. wisdom and pleasures, and now power he has. He's built the great temple and many other public works. If you go to Rome, there are all the monuments that the emperors built or the popes built. These kinds of things are all very good. But Koheleth looks back on all of these and that he has accomplished, and he sees them all as dust, the chasing of the wind. They amount to nothing in his eyes. And then he speaks about wealth. He says, I brought male and female slaves. I had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me. I gathered for myself silver and gold. I got singers and delights of the flesh. I became great, and my wisdom remained with me. I kept my heart from no pleasure. This was my reward for all of my toil. And how many of us will say that? We could convince ourselves we deserve it after all. Yet this too is vanity, mere chasing after the wind, says Koheleth. So what does it all mean to us today? This is someone who has really made it, the richest, most powerful man in the world. Donald Trump, a Steve Forbes, a Bill Gates, or Warren Buffett, or any one of our elected officials who has amassed great wealth and power. What does it all mean in the end? Well, it's all vanity, a chasing after the wind. And all this should leave us rather depressed, I have to admit, listening to the words of this old crank. But, as I said earlier, there is wisdom here. Wealth, power, pleasure, political accomplishments, all are good. But when we rely on such things for our ultimate happiness, we end up in serious trouble. When we base our lives on them, then we eventually collapse. And that's why we need Koheleth's words to say. Ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, all these earthly pleasures are nothing compared to God, compared to the ultimate value of Almighty God. And every generation needs to hear these words, because every generation that comes along says, I'm going to seek joy and pleasure and power in wealth, political accomplishments, or earthly wisdom. That's where I'll find my joy. And every generation needs to hear from this cranky old churchman that all that is vanity, a chasing after the wind. But still, why go through this exercise? This reflection that Koheleth gives us is meant to help us see all things in light of our ultimate purposes, our ultimate concerns. Can you use your wealth for God's purposes? Can you give your wisdom over to God's purposes? Can you put all your earthly accomplishments under God's plan? If you do, then they will find their deepest purpose and fullest meaning. Otherwise, when we cling to them, these things, they turn to dust. But when they are given to God, they are transfigured and become something beautiful, eternal, everlasting.